Samantha, are you there? I think we lost you.
Okay, sorry about that, everybody. We're back. We had a little technical glitch on our end. In any case, we'll jump right in. So one of the things that we're most concerned with here at the SAMFund is the financial impact of cancer on young adults especially, and whether that means going through treatment and not being able to work or trying to recover from treatment and that will help either supplement your income or really just help you with your day-to-day living expenses. So we are thrilled, beyond thrilled, to welcome Peter Smith from the Social Security Administration for today's webinar. Peter is a policy analyst with the U.S. Social Security Administration. He joined SSA in 2009 and works for the agency's Office of Disability Programs. He holds both his bachelor's and his law degrees from Florida International University and lives in Baltimore, Maryland. So Peter, welcome. Sorry for those glitches at the beginning. I didn't mean to take up more of your time, but we will jump right in. On behalf of everyone in this webinar, thank you for joining us and for sharing information about your program with people who really could benefit from it. So thank you so much for being here, and now the show is yours.
All right, thank you. So it looks like the first thing for me to do is get my slides up, right?
Yes.
So you let me know. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, yes we can.
All right, looks like we're good to go. Okay, so thank you, Samantha, and to everyone else at SAMFund for inviting me to come speak. And good afternoon to everyone else out there. And thank you all so much for the opportunity to talk with you today about Social Security disability programs and about SSA's Compassionate Allowances initiative. Again, for anyone who may have missed it the first time, my name is Peter Smith, and I'm a policy analyst with SSA's Office of Disability Programs. Much of my work here relates to our agency's Compassionate Allowances initiative, and we'll talk about that, among other things, today. I'm going to begin here by just giving a quick outline of what I hope to cover for you today. First, I'll talk very broadly about Social Security's two disability programs, including who qualifies for benefits and how you can apply for benefits. I'll also talk very briefly about how Medicare and Medicaid fit into that picture. And I'll finish up with a quick introduction to the Compassionate Allowances initiative and the role that it plays in those two disability programs. So I don't expect that this will take any more than maybe 30 or 40 minutes, so we should have plenty of time for questions. Some of you have already submitted questions online beforehand, and I'll make time to answer those. And everyone who's following on GoToMeeting, there should be a box on your GoToMeeting screen where you can type in questions, and those questions will go to the SAMFund folks in Boston, and I'll make sure to pause every few slides or so to answer any new questions that have come in. Now, typically when we do these webinars, I have a team of SSA staff here with me from various areas of expertise to help answering questions. Today, I just have one, and that's my colleague, James. So hopefully, between James and I, we'll be able to answer all the questions that you have. And for anything that we can't answer today, we will work through SAMFund to get you answers to those questions. Okay, so I think that covers it for logistics. So let's get started. First, let's talk about the disability programs. So the Social Security Administration administers two distinct disability programs under the Social Security Act. The first of these programs is the Social Security Disability Insurance Program, which we also call SSDI. Although commonly you may also hear this referred to as simply Social Security Disability. The second program is the Supplemental Security Income Program, which is most commonly called SSI. So just to recap, there are two disability programs. There's SSDI and there's SSI. These programs are not mutually exclusive. An applicant could apply to one or both programs, although it's only in certain circumstances that an individual could receive both SSDI and SSI benefits. Between the two programs, we received just shy of 3 million applications for disability benefits in 2012, and I would imagine that for 2013 we'll see very similar numbers at the end of the year. So let's begin with an overview of each, and we'll start with SSDI. So SSDI was the first of the two disability programs. It's authorized by Title II of the Social Security Act, and it's existed in some form or another since 1956. SSDI pays benefits to disabled individuals who are insured under the SSDI program. And what insured means is that the individual has essentially paid Social Security taxes over a required period of time. So SSDI is financed with Social Security taxes that are paid by workers and employers based on each worker's earnings. So if you take a look at your paycheck, you'll notice a section for FICA taxes, FICA being spelled F-I-C-A. FICA stands for Federal Insurance Contributions Act. And FICA is how contributions to the social insurance system are collected. Monthly disability benefits under SSDI are based on a worker's lifetime average earnings. So there's a mandatory 5-month waiting period after disability insurance benefits are awarded before payment is issued. And just to be clear, the 5-month waiting period begins the first full month after we determine your disability began, and not necessarily 5 months after a disability decision is rendered. Now this has a tendency to be confusing. So just to give an example, if we determine, for example, that you became disabled in January of 2012, but you waited until April of 2013 to apply for benefits, the 5-month waiting period could begin as early as January 2012. So you would have already completed the 5-month waiting period by the time a disability decision was made in April of the following year in 2013. And the reason that Congress created the 5-month waiting period was simply so that we don't pay benefits to individuals who are not permanently disabled. So also under the SSDI program, beneficiaries are eligible for Medicare after a 2-year waiting period, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a little bit. Now, I mentioned that SSDI is only available to individuals who are insured under the program, and this is another point that has a tendency to be confusing. So let's take a minute to flesh it out a bit. Again, being insured for SSDI means that an individual has paid enough FICA taxes over a sufficient period of time. So SSA uses a measurement unit known as a quarter of coverage to gauge insured status. You may also hear sometimes people refer to these as credits. So quarters of coverage or credits, it's the same thing. And in 2013, a quarter of coverage is equal to $1,060 in earnings. So if you earn $1,060, you get 1 quarter of coverage. For the next $1,060, you get a second quarter of coverage, and so on. And you can earn up to 4 quarters of coverage per year. The amount of earnings doesn't change drastically, but it is adjusted for inflation every year. So you get a quarter of coverage for each $1,060 you earn, and you can earn 4 quarters of coverage every year. Now, in order to be insured for SSDI, you have to have 1 quarter of coverage for every calendar year after you turned 21 years old. So if you're 62, you would need 40 quarters of coverage because there have been 40 calendar years since you were 21. And there's one more requirement, which is that 20 of those quarters of coverage must have been earned in the past 10 years. Now, for individuals who are younger than 31, fewer quarters of coverage are required, and we have a different formula for them, a slightly different formula, but the idea is roughly the same. And the reason for that is simply because the likelihood that someone under 31 has worked or has earned 20 quarters of coverage is much lower. So hopefully that clarifies some of your questions about insured status, but if you have more questions, we can certainly address those later on in the presentation. So the second disability benefits program that SSA administers is SSI. And SSI is authorized by Title 16 of the Social Security Act, and it's been in existence since 1972. The SSI program differs from SSDI in that SSI is a means-tested program or a needs-based program. SSI is available to adults with limited income and financial resources. In addition to these financial restrictions, SSI beneficiaries must also meet one of the following. So they must be either age 65 or older, or disabled or blind. SSI is also available to disabled children from birth to age 18. And SSI is paid out of U.S. Treasury general funds, so it's separate from the Social Security Trust Funds and is paid for by general revenue taxes, not FICA taxes. Now, because SSI is meant for low-income individuals, there are some income and resource limitations that are imposed on SSI eligibility. The maximum benefits for SSI is $710 for an individual and $1,066 for a couple. And generally speaking, income that you receive in a given month reduces that monthly benefit until it becomes zero. And you can find more guidance on SSA's website about calculating SSI benefits and about income limits. The SSI program also has resource limits. So whereas income limits refer to the value of income that you receive monthly, resources refer to any assets that you may already have, such as money in a savings account or real estate or personal property. And in 2013, the SSI program had resource limits of $2,000 for individuals and $3,000 for couples. When a child that's applying for SSI, we consider the parent's income and the parent's resources. Now, unlike SSDI, there is no waiting period for SSI. So an SSI beneficiary starts receiving benefits from the time that we determine his or her disability began. Also, in many states, SSI recipients are automatically made eligible for Medicaid, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes as well. But okay, so I think this is a good stopping point for our first questions break. So I'll pause here and answer one or two questions if any have come in. So Samantha, have we gotten any questions yet? If not, I'll keep going.
I think let's keep going, actually, because we did get one that we're not sure whether you're going to bring up later in the presentation, and if not, we can follow up or ask it at the very end. So I think,
okay.
You know, all is going great so far, and we can keep going.
All right, so I'll keep going, and that'll give us a little more time at the end to answer any questions. So
sounds great.
All right. Okay, now in order to receive benefits under either SSDI or SSI, an individual must first meet SSA's definition of disability. So at SSA, we consider you to be disabled under Social Security rules if you have a medical condition, and due to that medical condition, you cannot do work that you did before you were disabled, and we decide that you cannot adjust to any other work because of your medical condition. We also require that your disability either has lasted or is expected to last for at least 1 year, or that it is expected to result in death. Now, please bear in mind that SSA does not pay partial or short-term disability benefits. Okay, so earlier I mentioned Medicare coverage, and receipt of SSA's disability benefits may entitle beneficiaries to access to Medicare or Medicaid. Everyone who is eligible for SSDI benefits is also eligible for Medicare coverage. Enrollment in Medicare is automatic following 24 months of entitlement to disability benefits. The Medicare program is administered by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which is a federal agency that's independent of the Social Security Administration. So for more information on Medicare, I would advise anyone out there to visit the program's website, which is medicare.gov, or to call 1-800-MEDICARE. Likewise, beneficiaries for Social Security's SSI program may be eligible to receive Medicaid. For most states, the eligibility requirements for Medicaid mirror the requirements for SSI. And in fact, in many states, the application for SSI doubles as an application for Medicaid. So although Medicaid is jointly funded by the federal government and the individual states, the program is actually administered at the state level. So each state has its own rules about who is eligible and what's covered under Medicaid. So let's go a little deeper into how SSA makes the determination of whether an individual is disabled. The first question we ask is whether the individual is working. So recall that disability benefits are for individuals who cannot work because of their disability. So if an individual is working and earning above a specified threshold, we will find that individual to not be disabled. And that's the case regardless of their medical condition. So for 2013, the earnings threshold is $1,040 per month and $1,740 per month for blind individuals. So you cannot receive disability benefits if you earn above those monthly thresholds. And the thresholds are adjusted for inflation every year. Once we determine that an individual is not working and earning above the limit, we ask whether the individual has a severe medical impairment. And all this means, really, is does the individual have a condition that is established by medical evidence that limits basic work activities? If there is a severe medical condition and one is established, we look to see if the condition is found first in SSA's listing of impairments. And the listing of impairments are SSA rules that contain the most common medical conditions that are severe enough to preclude an individual from working. If an individual's condition is found in the listings, then we will find that an individual is disabled. The listings are codified in the federal regulation, and you can find them on SSA's website. If the individual's condition is not found in the listing of impairments, we consider whether the individual nevertheless cannot work. So we do this by first assessing the individual's ability to function. In other words, what can the individual do and what are that person's limitations. So with that knowledge in hand, we then compare it to the person's work history to determine if they can return to a line of work that he or she previously performed. And if they can't return to any of their previous jobs, we then look to see if there are any other jobs that exist in the national economy that they can perform. And if we find that there are no jobs that that person is capable of performing, then we will determine that that person is disabled. So that's how we determine disability for adults. But real quickly, I'll just address how we do so for children, because children can also apply for disability benefits under the SSI program. So children under age 18 typically don't have a work history, so the process for determining disability among children is a little bit different. To begin, SSA has a different definition for disability for evaluating child claims. So under Social Security rules, a child under 18 is considered disabled if he or she has a medically determinable impairment that causes functional limitations. So limitations must severely reduce the child's ability for age-appropriate activities. And the impairment, again, must have lasted or be expected to last for a continuous period of 12 months or be expected to result in death. So whereas with adults, we look to whether the adult can work, with children, we look to whether a child's functional abilities are reduced in relation to other children of the same age. Okay, so next I'll talk about the application process, how to apply for disability. But before I get there, do we have any questions that have come in?
We did have one, and so I'm going to ask it, and then if it's something you're about to cover in the application part, then we can table the question for now until the next slide. But the question was about whether if somebody was receiving SSI at one point and then was denied or stopped receiving it because it was determined that she wasn't disabled any longer, can she apply again?
The short answer is yes. So there's no limitation on the number of times that you can apply, and if you have received benefits in the past and they were ceased for whatever reason, you're always eligible to apply again, even if it's the same medical condition. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thanks. And to the person whose question it was, if you need more information or if there's a follow-up question, just let us know.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Peter.
Okay, I'll keep going. Okay, so on to the application process. So what you see here is a quick rundown of some of the information that we will ask you during, I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. Okay. Actually, I skipped the slide. Let me go back. This is the slide I should be on. All right, so there are two ways to apply for benefits. The first way is to apply online, and you can do this by visiting our website, which is www.socialsecurity.gov, and you can select the Apply Online for Disability Benefits link, which is on the left-hand side under the Top Services heading. The second way to apply is in person at one of our field offices, which are located across the country. We have several thousand, either 2,000 to 3,000 field offices around the country, so chances are there is one near you. And you can schedule in-person appointments by visiting the field office or by calling our toll-free number, which is 1-800-772-1213. You can also call this toll-free number for answers to any other questions that you may have regarding filing a claim. Okay, now onto the slide. So what you see here is a quick rundown of some of the information that we will ask you during the application process. So we'll ask you to tell us about your condition, just very generally. We'll ask you about any treatment that you've received for your condition, any medications that you may be taking. We'll ask you about your educational background, your past work history, and we'll ask you to provide us with permission to request medical records from your doctors. Okay, so on this slide is a screenshot from the online application for SSDI benefits. So the benefits application collects information such as demographic information and earnings and income information. So I just put that up there to give everybody a sense of kind of what the interface looks like and what you can expect if you go online to apply. So here is an excerpt from SSA's Adult Disability Report, which is another piece that you'll have to fill out when you apply for disability. And the Adult Disability Report is completed after the disability application. And it collects information on the claimant's medical history and work history. And more specifically, we'll ask you to provide things like contact information for your doctors, dates for jobs that you've held, medicines that you're taking, information about the level of education that you've attained, things along those lines. So this is really where the bulk of the information is. The disability application is actually fairly short, and then the adult disability report is where we collect most of the information. So when applying online for individuals who have alleged a condition that is on our Compassionate Allowances list, which I'll talk about in a few slides. Folks who have applied online with a condition that is a Compassionate Allowance, we do not require that you complete the work history component of the adult disability report. Okay, so now that the claimant has filed an application, what can we expect next? The application is forwarded for evaluation to the State Disability Determination Services, which we also call the DDS. The DDSs are agencies that are run by each state that make disability findings on behalf of SSA. So they're not federal entities, they're state-run, but they make the disability determination on behalf of Social Security. And upon receipt, the DDS, upon receipt in the DDS, the case is assigned to a disability examiner, and the examiner reviews the evidence and consults with the staff physicians and psychologists. They contact the claimant's medical sources and review the claimant's statements of daily activities, what they can and can't do each day. In addition, we may request a consultative examination of the claimant to gather further information. So if your medical records are incomplete or are unclear, or we haven't been able to obtain them for any reason, things like that, we may request that you get a consultative exam through another doctor. So after all of that information is gathered, the DDS will make the initial disability decision on the claim. Now, if your claim is denied by the DDS, you have the option to appeal the decision. So first, your claim will be reconsidered by a second disability examiner at the DDS. So it'll be essentially the same process. You just kind of go through again. So the first time you had a DDS or a disability examiner review your claim, if they denied it, a second disability examiner will review your claim just to make sure that the decision was correct or that no errors were made. So that if it's denied again, you have the option to appeal the decision for review by an administrative law judge. Now, each time you appeal or file for reconsideration, the agency takes a brand new look at your claim. So the earlier denial does not in any way influence the new decision. You're also not limited by how many claims you can file. So as I just mentioned with, sort of repeat the answer to the earlier question, if you filed for disability at a previous time in your life, you're still allowed to file a new claim now or in the future, regardless of the outcome of any previous claim that you filed. So just tacking onto the back of the application process, I just want to introduce really quickly one of Social Security's newest features. This is the My Social Security web portal. My Social Security lets users create an account and complete many of the tasks online that previously could not be completed over the internet. So of course we've supported online filing for benefits for a while for SSDI, but the idea with My Social Security is that it gives users more functionality to control their accounts online. So if you already receive benefits or have Medicare, you can use My Social Security to check your benefit and payment information and check your earnings records. You can change your address, your phone number. You can start or change direct deposit for your benefits payments. So many of the sort of small administrative tasks that you previously would have had to go into a field office or call online, you can now do online through My Social Security. If you don't receive benefits, you can use My Social Security to review estimates of your disability benefits. So if you're looking to apply or thinking for whatever reason that you may apply in the future or just curious, you can see estimates of what your disability benefits would be if you were receiving them, as well as estimates for retirement and survivor's benefits. You can also review your earnings records and view estimates of the Social Security and Medicare taxes that you've paid. You can access My Social Security from the SSA homepage or directly by going to socialsecurity.gov/ socialsecurity.gov/myaccount. Again, that's socialsecurity.gov/myaccount. Okay, so now that we've introduced SSA's 2 disability programs, and hopefully you're a bit more acquainted with those programs at this point, let's talk briefly about the Compassionate Allowances Initiative. So Compassionate Allowances, which we also call CAL, are a way of quickly identifying diseases and other medical conditions that invariably qualify under SSA's listing of impairments based on minimal objective medical information. So in other words, CAL conditions are those that are so severe that really proof of the diagnosis alone is enough to make the disability determination. So Compassionate Allowances allow Social Security to quickly target the most obviously disabled individuals for allowances. It's a fast-track program. In other words, it moves individuals to the front of the line so they can receive a decision sooner than they otherwise likely would have. CAL is not a separate program from SSDI or SSI. It's really just a means to expedite a decision of one of those 2 programs. So expedite either an SSDI or an SSI decision. With this in mind, it does not change the amount of benefits to which an individual is entitled. It does not change access to Medicare or Medicaid. And it does not change the mandatory waiting periods that exist under those programs. So the CAL initiative began in October of 2008 with 50 conditions, which included 25 cancers and 25 rare diseases. And since then, we've added 150 more conditions to the list. So we now have 200 conditions in total. And we expect to announce a new set of additions early next year. So how are conditions selected for compassionate allowances? I think this is an important piece of understanding the CAL initiative. So really, we make this decision after soliciting input from a number of sources. We gather information from public outreach hearings. We work with advocacy groups. We solicit comments from the Social Security and disability determination communities. So these are the individuals who deal with claimants on a day-to-day basis. We talk with medical and scientific experts from around the country, and we collaborate on research with the National Institutes of Health. So it takes quite a few months to gather information from all these sources and make a final determination as to whether a condition will be added to the CAL list. And then on top of that, we also have to prepare our computer systems to be able to identify those conditions when individuals apply for benefits. So again, one of the approaches that we use to gather information on potential CAL conditions is to conduct public outreach hearings. And since the initiative's inception in 2007, 2008, we've held 7 public outreach hearings throughout the country. And with each of these hearings, the National Institutes of Health has been a co-host. The objective of the hearings is to obtain medical and scientific information about potential CAL conditions, and also to provide a forum for individuals living with these illnesses and their families to share their experiences with the agency. NIH has played an integral role in helping us advance the CAL initiative, and several of the institutes have participated in those hearings, and we continue to collaborate with them on research to inform which conditions are added to the Compassionate Allowances list. So additional information about the hearings, including archived webcasts of each of them, are available at the Compassionate Allowances website, which is www.socialsecurity.gov/compassionate allowances. and I'll put that web address up on the final slide, so don't worry about catching it right now if you missed it.
All right, well, we have lots of questions for you, Peter. I didn't want to interrupt as you were going through those last few slides. It was all really important and great stuff. So I'll just sort of give them to you in the answer that they were asked.
Okay, that sounds great.
The first one is about whether or not somebody can be in school or go back to school if they're approved for disability.
Right, okay, so yes, and I think this question was one that actually came in earlier. So the short answer is that being in school, being enrolled in school is not, does not preclude you from receiving disability benefits. So it's not as though being in school is sort of equivalent to working. So the short answer is that if you are in school or you're thinking of going back to school and you're currently receiving benefits, being enrolled does not, will not cause you to lose those benefits or preclude you from receiving benefits in the future. I think it's also probably worth noting as well that SSA sometimes has the capacity to work with individuals who are thinking of going back to work or going back to school, in the sense that obviously school can be expensive. And for individuals who are on SSI benefits, sometimes it's difficult, right, to pay for school, have the resources to pay for school, but also stay below the resource limitations for SSI. So one of the options in that regard is SSA has an option which is called Plan to Achieve Self-Support. And essentially this is a program where for individuals who are thinking of going to school or for other things, but anything that would amount to helping you get back on your feet and get back to work and back into the workforce, we will work with you to put together a plan whereby resources that you have that are dedicated for that purpose do not count towards the SSI resource limitations. So if you have a pot of money that you've determined, I am going to use this to pay for tuition for school or for rehabilitation to get you back to work, anything along those lines, we can work with, SSA has the ability to work with that individual to sort of take that money and set it aside and say, okay, this pot of money does not count towards your SSI resource limitations. So hopefully that is helpful. And again, if I didn't answer your question while I'm kind of going along, feel free to sort of shoot a follow-up, and I'll be happy to go into it a little more deeply.
That's great. Thanks, Peter. So we had a couple questions about the working while receiving benefits issue, and I think earlier in the presentation you had said that there is a threshold. If somebody goes above that threshold in terms of their earnings each month, then they're no longer eligible to receive benefits.
Yes.
And I think you said that was $1,040.
Yes.
$1,040. Okay. So the question was about sort of, and to the person who asked this question, I hope that I'm doing your question justice. And if I am misunderstanding the question, then just try and ask it a different way so that I can understand it better. But as far as I understand it, the question is about why you're allowed to work while you're on disability when it seems like working could actually disqualify you from receiving it in the first place.
Sure. So, so it's a good question. Generally, the idea is that we allow individuals to, so it's not so much, so I understand that the question is, really we talk about disability being work-related and you're disabled if you can't work. But really, the way the rules are structured, the way we define work is earning above that limit, right? So if an individual is able to sustain working while continuing to earn below that $1,040 threshold, as an agency, we will not see that as working, right? So I can understand where that would be tricky, kind of the language of it, but really I think the point to understand is that if you're working and earning below that limit, that will not negatively affect you later when we ask the question of, is this individual able to work?
Got it. I think you may have just gotten to the heart of that question. Thank you for understanding.
So I can definitely understand how it's confusing, especially when we talk about work disability. And I think it's easier to speak about it sort of in those broad general terms, but really in the weeds, the way we define working is earning above $1,040. So for individuals who are able to maintain that threshold, which the reality is that our experience is that there are not many individuals who are able to sustain that pattern of continually working month after month, earning below that amount. It's usually either they're earning above it or they're not working at all. But there are instances where an individual may earn some money, and we don't want beneficiaries to lose their benefits entirely simply because they did an odd job where they earned $50. So we give a little sort of wiggle room in there before benefits are cut off.
There was actually a related question that came in. So you said there's that 5-month waiting period, right?
Yes.
What happens to somebody's ability to work while the determination is being made? So if someone is working, making a little bit more than the $1,040, or somewhere around there, or even just in general, the question is, can you work while you're waiting on that SSD determination?
The short answer to that is no. Remember that the first question we ask is, are you working? So are you earning above that $1,040? So if we determine that you are, then you will be denied. And that's the case regardless of what your medical condition is. So if when you apply, you are working and earning above that limit, or you at some point during the determination process begin working and earning above that limit, we'll immediately determine that you are not disabled simply because of the fact that you are earning above our maximum requirement.
Got it. Okay, there was another question. Having to do, we actually had 2 questions come in, both having to do with the process sort of retroactively. So the first one is about somebody whose husband should have been eligible for a compassionate allowance, was put on that 5-month waiting list instead, and unfortunately passed away 3 days prior to the 5-month wait, or prior to the end of that 5-month wait. And so her question is whether you can go back and request a review of the SSDI benefits that should have been awarded even after the individual has died.
So if I'm understanding the question correctly, so recall that one of the things with compassionate allowances is that it doesn't change any of the requirements for SSDI. So the 5-month waiting period is still part of the process. So it sounds like at least part of that question is maybe the assumption, and forgive me if I have it wrong, but it sounds like the assumption in that question is that the 5-month waiting period is foregone, maybe because of a compassionate allowance condition, and that's not the case, unfortunately. So the 5-month waiting period is actually in the Social Security Act, so it's statutory. So as an agency, we don't have any discretion to do away with that or change that in any way. So all we're able to do with compassionate allowances really is expedite the determination. So it sounds like in this case maybe the determination was made, but the individual was still waiting through that 5-month period. And unfortunately, there's nothing that the Compassionate Allowances Initiative is able to do to change that 5-month waiting period. It's part of the process.
Got it. Okay, thanks. So the other question about this retroactive piece, we had a question from somebody who didn't know that this was available years ago. I think she's talking 3 or 4 years, as best I could tell, and she's been unable to work but didn't know that it was an option for her to apply, and she's not totally sure that she would meet the qualifications now. And so to tell you the truth, I'm not sure if she can work or can't work now. We can clarify that with her. But is it an option this many years later? And you talked about the 5 months, and you talked about how everything sort of gets retroactively placed back to the date of when the disability was acquired or when it was determined. And so if it's now been several years and she hasn't been able to work this whole time, can she go back and apply for benefits retroactively?
Yeah, so you're always able to apply for benefits, and when we are making the determination, it is certainly a possibility and an option to retroactively determine essentially the date of onset for that disability to be several years ago. So that happens very frequently, that we will determine the onset of the disability to have begun well before an individual ever steps into one of our offices or applies online. So that's pretty common. The one thing that would be worth looking into for someone who has waited several years to apply would be, and has not been working that whole time, would be whether they meet the insurance requirements for SSDI. So recall that one of the, when we were talking about the quarters of coverage, and I know that that's a confusing piece, but one of the requirements is that essentially you have to have earned half of your quarters of coverage over the last 10 years, or 20 quarters of coverage over the last 10 years. So it's possible that for someone who has been out of work for several years, maybe not the case if it's 2 or 3 or 4 years, but if it's certainly probably more than 4 or 5, it may be the case that they are no longer insured for SSDI, in which case their only option is to apply for SSI. And with SSI, we do not pay retroactive payment to the date before you applied. It's only the date from when you when you applied is when we will begin payment. So hopefully that sheds a little bit of light on their scenario. But the short answer, I think, is if you can't work and it's because of your medical condition, you're certainly eligible to apply at any time.
Great. And so another question came in from a woman who has 2 children, both of whom are receiving SSDI, and she wants to know if that fact will affect her own application for disability for herself.
That's an area that's kind of outside my expertise. My inclination is to say no, but I think this might be a situation where maybe if we can get more information, if we could encourage that person to maybe send more information to you, and you could get it to us, and we could work through you guys to answer her question more directly. Because that's an area that I'm not terribly familiar with. I sense there's a lot of nuance to that particular area, and I unfortunately don't know all of it.
Okay, well, I appreciate you offering to help us figure it out after the fact. So we'll certainly follow up with her and follow up with you. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, for anybody else who comes up with questions later, we're happy to continue answering them and fielding questions well after the webinar. That's why we're here. So
great, thank you. So we have a couple more minutes if anyone else has some last-minute questions they want to put in. I'll ask you one about the employment piece, because earlier on in the presentation you talked about the difference being between not being able to do the work you did before versus not being able to work, period. And I think you mentioned something about finding other gainful employment, other work that you're able to do.
Yes.
And so I was curious about how that gets determined, and more importantly, whether there's any sort of guidance from SSA or from anybody there in terms of finding those other employment opportunities.
Sure. So very broadly, the second half of our determination process is, recall that the first thing we do is we look to see if you meet one of the listings, which is sort of the federal regulations and it's a list of conditions that we've already determined essentially meet our requirements for disability. If you don't meet those, then we sort of get into this discussion of, can you work still? And the way we make that determination is we put together what's called a residual functional capacity profile for the individual. And that's a complicated way of saying this is what you are capable of doing functionally and what you're incapable of doing functionally. And then we consult with vocational experts. And what a vocational expert is they have a sense of what jobs exist in the national economy and what the functional requirements are of those jobs. So essentially what's happening is you have this profile of the person who's applied with their characteristics of what they can do and what they can't do. And we try and match that up to profiles of jobs that are out there of what those jobs require an individual to do. So as an example, if you have a condition that means you have to, you can't stand all day, jobs that would require a lot of standing, they're out of the picture. We're not going to consider them. Or if it's a job that requires heavy lifting and you can't do any heavy lifting, again, we're not going to consider those jobs. So all Social Security does as an agency is make the determination of whether there are jobs that you can do. SSA does not, except for a few instances with folks who are already beneficiaries. We do not provide services, sort of vocational rehabilitation services, to help individuals find those jobs. So those are services that are often offered by the state, and there are Department of Labor programs, but as an agency, Social Security is not involved. It's not within our mission as defined by our statute to actually be in the business of helping individuals find those jobs afterwards.
Got it. That makes sense. You guys have yes, you guys have a lot on your plate, so that makes sense. So I think the good thing is that there are some great resources in the community that, really in most communities, that will help with employment-related things. So it's just a matter of getting people linked up with the appropriate resources, I think, and hopefully we can help in some ways with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually there are many of the folks who are in our field offices are well-versed in what services are available. So I myself, a lot of times it depends on which specific community you're in, but our field office representatives are very in tune with the communities that they work in. So they are often good resources for what resources may be available. I will say that and I alluded to this earlier, for individuals who are currently receiving benefits, Social Security does offer services to try and get those folks back to work. So if you are receiving benefits, but you think that you'd like to try working, one of the problems that folks often confront is this idea of, well, they want to try working. They're not sure if they can do it, but they want to give it a try, but they're afraid that if they start working and they earn above the limit, they will lose their benefits. So Social Security has a few programs where we will help individuals sort of find placements to get them back to work, and then we can give them a trial work period where they can earn as much as they want. without fear of losing their benefits for going over that limit. And then at the end of that trial work period, the beneficiary, the individual, can decide, do they want to keep working? Is this something for them, or do they feel like they can't work anymore? This wasn't, this didn't go as well as they had hoped, and then they can go back to their normal receipt of benefits as they were before the trial work period.
That's good to know, too. So it's not necessarily an all-or-nothing proposition.
Right. Yeah.
Great. Well, we are just about at 4 o'clock. I think there were a couple of questions that came in that we didn't have a chance to get to, and I apologize to those participants that we didn't have a chance to ask Peter your questions, but please email us. We will finish up with some information about how to contact us, and let us know if you have questions either that we didn't get to or you have questions that come up after the fact. We will do our best to connect you up with Peter and get your questions answered. So, Peter, I will turn it over to you for this last slide.
All right. So I just want to say, I don't have much else to say. Just, again, thank you for having me, and thank you for your interest. And hopefully this was helpful to everyone that was out there listening. And, again, if you have questions, feel free to either get them to us through SAMFund or through our email box at Social Security. Either way, we're happy to answer them. And I want to thank SAMFund for setting this up. This was great, and I really appreciated you having me. It was a lot of fun and hopefully educational too.
Well, Peter, I know on behalf of everybody who participated and everyone who's going to listen to this after the fact, this was tremendously helpful. I think a lot of times the prospect of any sort of income support, especially when it's government related, is so intimidating to so many people and really could be such a source of important support. And so I really appreciate how you broke down the whole process and you answered questions thoroughly and just presented it in a very helpful, usable, clear, et cetera, good way. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We really appreciate it. We'll certainly follow up with you. And based on the interest in this one particular webinar, we probably will be coming back to you for a second one at some point. So thank you for doing this, Peter.
All right, we look forward to it. And thank you.
Thank you. So just to wrap this up, for everybody on this webinar, thank you guys for taking this last hour to join us. I hope you found the information you were looking for. Again, you can feel free to follow up with us anytime at webinars@thesamfund.org. If you have feedback to share, if you have ideas for future topics, most importantly, if you have questions that we didn't get to or anything you think about after the fact, please let us know. We're here to support you. We're here to help you get the information that you need to keep moving forward. So please reach out to us anytime. And you can check back on our website, which is on your screen right now, thesamfund.org/whatwedo/webinars. There'll be a downloadable copy of this webinar. We're working also on getting copies out on YouTube, so keep an eye out for that. But we really want to make this accessible to as many people as possible for as long as possible. So check back for that in a day or two. And then if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to complete our post-webinar survey, we really value your feedback, and we're constantly using the information that we get from webinar participants to keep making this program better and keep making it more helpful as we go along. So the link is on your screen, surveymonkey.com/SS-post1, Social Security Post 1. So again, thank you guys for joining us. We have a few more on the schedule coming up in the next few months, so keep an eye on our website, on our Facebook page. We will reach out to you when we have other webinars coming up, and we hope you all have a great rest of the day. Thanks.